I'm Stephanie. Hello. First things first, I should explain what I'm doing. Hello, I'm Stephanie, and I really love Avatar the Last Airbender TV show. It's one of my favorite series, and so I wanted to make a video or a couple videos talking about some observations I had, particularly around the way that they choose to do storytelling, just their method of storytelling I really like. I also have a couple questions that maybe you guys can answer. But first thing I wanted to point out, so I'm just going to start with book one, Water, but I'm going to be referencing books two and three in this video, so there will be spoilers for the whole series of The Last Airbender. No spoilers for Legend of Korra because I haven't seen it yet. So yes, book one. First thing I just wanted to get off right off the bat was Zuko's hair is so long, and I didn't think about it that much when I watched it before. But just for reference, this is how long my hair is. I don't know. Can you see how long it is? And if I were to put it up in a ponytail like Zuko has, I'll just use my fist because he's got like a thing to prop his ponytail up a little bit. His hair ends like here, so it's only like 2 inches shorter than mine. And he only has that one little section of hair, and it's super thick. So if you guys weren't really focused on that, I wanted you to be focused on it for whatever reason. Okay, I have a couple notes here, so I'm going to be referencing those. First thing, it's not super important, but I just noticed that the first episode is called The Boy in the Iceberg, and that is also the title of the play for the Ember Island players, which I just thought was an interesting connection. So, in the first episode, it starts out with Sokka and Katara in their boat, and he is essentially ice dodging, which comes up later when we meet Bato of the Water Tribe. But I thought it was super interesting how they chose to show Sokka essentially failing at the rite of passage for manhood. In this scene, he has not yet accepted or embraced bending as a concept. He mentions it multiple times when Katara is just playing with water. Let's see, he says,
Why is it that every time you play with magic water, I get soaked?
Look, I'm just saying that if I had weird powers, I'd keep my weirdness to myself.
Okay, you've gone from weird to freakish, Katara. You don't like my steering. Well, maybe you should have water-bended us out of the ice.
Great. You're an airbender, Katara's a waterbender. Together, you can just waste time all day long.
You're just a guy with a boomerang. I didn't ask for all this flying and magic.
So at this stage, he hasn't accepted bending, hasn't embraced it, and he doesn't have any adult male role model figures in his life anymore because they've all gone off to war, and he fails at ice dodging. Then later, when he's had time to grow and learn, and now he fully embraces bending by the time that he is reunited with Bato, and he goes ice dodging again. And the reason that he's most successful is because he puts his faith in Katara and Aang, and at the end, they tell him that's good enough and you could stop, but he chooses to keep going because he knows that with their bending, he's able to go even farther. And I thought that was a really special moment and an interesting comparison that they outlined immediately in the first episode as a way to show how much he's growing. And it also is one of the many examples to show how much Katara is growing in waterbending. In the earlier episodes, she can hardly move a bucket-sized amount of water, and she's really failing when she's fighting Zuko's guards on his ship to even attack in the right direction. And by the time that she's going with Sokka ice dodging, she's able to lift this huge wave, and she's much more powerful. So it's just a great example of showing how much she's learned and how much she's grown as well. And even more so by the time they get to the North Pole and she trains with Paku, she's just on a whole other level than she was at that first episode. So I think it's really great that they showed us that right off the bat as a benchmark. Something else for Katara's waterbending, I think it's really interesting how they chose to have her. In the first episode, she gets really angry, and because of her emotion behind her, she can't see it, but she is throwing huge amounts of water and she's cracking the ice. And then when she gets to the North Pole, the same thing happens where she's angry at a man and is just releasing all of her energy, and it comes out as this really strong display of waterbending. Something I noticed was Uncle Iroh, when he's on Zuko's ship in the very beginning, he's playing a game that has the four elements in it, and as Zuko's talking about chasing the Avatar, he places an air tile on top of a fire tile. I think it's supposed to show how much the hunt for the Avatar has consumed Zuko. It's just a really subtle thing that I liked that they put in there. When Katara rescues Aang, and he's laying just outside of the iceberg, it kind of starts off as a Little Mermaid style rescue where the man is just waking up, just regaining consciousness, and she's leaning over him, just angelic. But then they have this really funny comedy moment where he says, "Come closer,"
What is it?
and then he asks her to go penguin sledding or
Will you go penguin
penguin
sledding with
sailing.
me?
I'm not sure what it's called. I just thought that was really funny, bit of comedy there. I also like that they show immediately that Aang has a crush on Katara. It's when he's just staring at her and she's like, "What are you staring at?" or "What are you smiling at?" As opposed to having their love or their romance just come out of nowhere. I like that they established immediately that he's got a crush on her, and she doesn't have a crush on him until she doesn't even see him that way until Madam after she has her reading with Madam Wu, and then Sokka says, "Wow, Aang's a really powerful bender," and you can just see it in her eyes that she's never thought of him that way before, but she finally does at that moment. So that makes me curious if she never had that reading, if she would have ended up developing a crush on Aang later, or if she still would have just saw him as a little buddy like Momo. I don't know. Question. This is one of the questions I have for you guys. Did Aang pee in the watchtower at the South Pole? Because he comes out of it, it says, "Man, everything freezes in there." They just move right along and don't address that again at all. I'm not sure what they're trying to say there, but I think he might have peed in the watchtower. It's a great storytelling moment when Katara and Aang are riding the penguins, and Katara says, "Wow, I haven't done this since I was a kid," and Aang says, "You still are a kid," because as far as Katara and Sokka are concerned, since their dad left and their mom had already died at that point, they have had to see themselves as adults and take care of themselves. And of course, they still have the other adult women in the tribe, but they're the two oldest kids there. So they're seeing themselves as young adults trying to take on the role. Obviously, Sokka's trying to take on the role of warrior, and Katara, she's really good at sewing, and she's trying to take on the woman's role that exists in the southern tribe. So they're seeing themselves as adults, and Aang is there to remind them that even though they've had this traumatic experience that's led to that, they still are kids, and they can still be kids. And when Sokka is training the children, he says, "We call ourselves men." So that's another point of him seeing himself as a man, even though he and those other children, who are quite small, are still kids. Something that they do a few times in the series is set something up either earlier in the episode or in a previous episode, and then essentially mirror the situation later. So I mentioned the ice dodging, that's one example, but another small example that I liked was when Sokka's trying to defend the village, Zuko hits him 3 times with a stick, and then when they're on Zuko's ship and Zuko grabs onto Aang's staff while Sokka's holding it, he hits him 3 times again in the head. So it's like a small mirroring thing that I just really like how they do that. Since the genocide of the Airbenders took place 100 years ago, no one has any experience fighting an Airbender. I love how they showed us that. For example, Zuko's crew on his ship, they're totally blindsided when Aang tries to run past them. He just breezes past them, and I love how they made them just totally unaware of what to do, as opposed to making them even slightly evenly matched to Aang, just because they're so out of their depth trying to fight someone who uses this style. I love that. This is another question I have for you guys. So, in the temple, when the Southern Air Temple, when we see the 1,000 Avatar statues, the statue next to Roku isn't Kyoshi, and I'm not sure why. If it was just a continuity issue, or if they're not in order, or if there's some other reason. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that. Just let me know. There's a moment when Katara is trying to comfort Aang, and she says, even though the monks are gone, we're still here, and we're your family, we love you. And this is later when Aang is training to unlock his chakras with the Guru. This is exactly the same thing the Guru says.
Monk Gyatso and the other airbenders may be gone, but you still have a family. Sokka and I, we're your family now.
The air nomad's love for you has not left this world. It is still inside of your heart and is reborn in the form of new love.
Those scenes are so far separated, but it's still like a beautiful callback to that moment. So there's lots of moments where they show Sokka behaving in a sexist way, just being a sexist person. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it actually makes a lot of sense for his character to have those beliefs and behave that way, because he's been trying since he was pretty young, since his father left and the rest of the adult men in his village left. He's been trying to embody that sense of being a man and being a manly protector. And so much so because he's trying to compensate for all the men being gone in his tribe. Plus, when we see the whole village, we can see that Katara is the only girl his age that he's ever been around, since everyone else is either an adult or basically a toddler. So he has, for one thing, the overcompensation of manliness, trying to take the place of all the adult men who are suddenly gone, and secondly, such limited experience even interacting with girls his age, young women at all. And his tribe has some pretty definitive gender roles where the men are the warriors. His dad tells him when he goes off, I need you to protect Katara. So she's someone who needs protection. And the women, as he says when they're flying on Appa, the women do the sewing and the cooking, cleaning, whatever. So that's his only experience, and he's really got sort of a hyperbolic expression of that. When Sokka's training with the Kyoshi warriors, Suki tells him that the fan should be an extension of his arm, and that's the exact same thing that his sword master teacher tells him about the sword being an extension of his arm. So that's another mirroring callback. They travel to Omashu twice, and the first time Aang says, welcome to the city of Omashu, and they really set that up to be mirrored a second time and to act as a stark contrast when Sokka says, welcome to the city of oh my gosh, or whatever. It's just by showing us the city once in all its glory, it helps us really understand like I said, the contrast of when it's been taken over, and having those exact lines and then just fall off at the end. I thought that was really cool. This is less of a storytelling thing and more just a subversion of expectations. There's one part where they are riding the mail chute cart and they're headed towards these boards of wood that are going over the edge of something, and they look like they're set up on a ramp, so you might think that they're about to be launched over the edge, but they just bulldoze straight through them, totally destroy them. So that's kind of a I thought a funny subversion of expectations. Episode 6, Fresnel lenses. I'm an optical engineer, so noticing those optics, they have them in the prisoner ship that they're keeping the Earth Nation prisoners in, and they're using them as their beacon light, or I guess I don't know if it's supposed to be kind of lighthouse style or searchlight style, but those are exactly the kind of lenses that are used in lighthouses, so I thought that was awesome that they included that. When Aang enters the spirit world and he's trying to protect that town from the forest spirit Heibai, he's flying on Roku's dragon, and they pass Uncle Iroh, and Iroh can see the dragon. And then later, in the siege of the North Pole, Commander Zhao, or Lieutenant, whatever he is at that point, says, "Yes, I've heard about your trip to the spirit world." But I don't think they ever mentioned that again. And I'm super curious what that journey was. Why did he go? Where did he go? I would love to see that. I don't know if they address it in Legend of Korra because I have not seen that. But I think that's a super fascinating tale that has not been told, I guess. And it also raises the question that now that Sokka has been to the spirit world because Heibai took him there and brought him back, does that mean that Sokka is going to be able to see spirit animals when they are flying in the human world? I don't know. Interesting. When Uncle Iroh is talking about his Pai Sho tile, he emphasizes that it's useful for the unusual strategy and it's more important or more valuable than most people think. And it's just neat how they use this, obviously, to set up later for the Order of the White Lotus. It's another thing that, because they set it up earlier, it doesn't just come out of nowhere, like they just threw it in. It's obvious that it's been integrated well into the story. I also thought it was a great moment when Aang buys the bison whistle, because initially it seems like a useless thing, and it becomes useful in that episode, but they continue to use it throughout the series. I really like how they kept bringing that up and kept using it. It's really important for them. When Katara gets the waterbending scrolls and she learns the true waterbending forms, the first one that she learns is the water whip, and that becomes her signature move. And I love that we see where she got her signature move from, and we see her learn it again, as opposed to it just being some random move that has no explanation. We understand how she knows that move and why it's important to her. Obviously, it's useful because it uses a small amount of water, but it's the first real waterbending form she ever learns. When Zuko speaks out in the war room, the time that leads to his Agni Kai with his father and himself becoming scarred, he's speaking out of the compassion of his heart. So we as the audience get to see that he's been a compassionate person, and that's who he truly is. So he has this amazing arc. It's one of the best character arcs I've ever seen. We know that he's just returning to who he truly is. He's getting rid of his rage and his anger and his need to feel his father's approval, and he's getting back to who he wants to be and making himself proud and feeling the love of people who actually care about him, like his uncle. In the storm, Zuko chooses to save the crew and himself, but to save the crew instead of going after the Avatar in that last moment. I think that shows that he regrets putting them in danger after he rescues the helmsman. Again, that's showing the empathy that he has. One moment I really like is when Aang is rescued by the blue spirit and he finds out that it's Zuko, and when Zuko wakes up, Aang says, "Do you think if we met 100 years ago we could have been friends?" And then later in the episode, Katara and Sokka ask if he made any friends, and he says, "I don't think so." I love that they put this in there so that in the last episode, when Zuko and Aang are having their one-on-one conversation, he says, "And now we're friends." And it's just, I just think that it was really beautiful and sweet. I just want to take a second to talk about what a horrible person Teo's father is. I know that, of course, everyone can have their own opinion about any character, and some of you may love Teo's father. He's very creative and smart, but I think he's really selfish, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that he destroyed the air temple for absolutely no reason. So let me just explain this a little bit. His village was destroyed by a flood. So it's not something Fire Nation related. So the Fire Nation wasn't chasing them. They didn't need to go into hiding or anything. They simply needed a new home in the Earth Kingdom, which is huge. He chose to take everyone in the village into an air temple where a genocide was committed, and what was a quarter of what's left of air nomad heritage or territory or their old home, since no one knew who the Avatar was yet, that could have been the death place of the Avatar or the birthplace of the Avatar. And he chose, for no good reason, to destroy it. And he thinks it was so great because his son could have a glider chair. Okay, I'm sure there's plenty of cliffs in the Earth Kingdom where you could have let your son have a glider chair. You didn't have to destroy something sacred and something historically significant to a race of people that, up until this moment, had been completely wiped out. Just totally selfish and totally disrespectful, and it makes me so mad to see. And then, on top of that, him building weapons for the Fire Nation, again, totally unnecessary. Upon retrospect, or upon viewing it again, we see that the Fire Nation's only threat is to the air temple.
They were going to destroy everything.
So
Burn
if
it to the ground.
the Fire Nation was like, okay, we're about to destroy this temple. Let's say that they came and they told Teo's dad, we're going to destroy this temple right now. Let's say it's high stakes. We're going to destroy it right now. And then his dad says, well, I'm an inventor. I can build you weapons. And they say, okay, you have a month or whatever to build us a weapon. We'll come back. He didn't actually have to build them anything. He could say, hey, everyone, the Fire Nation just threatened us. We have a month to get all our stuff and get as far away from here as we can. They're going to come destroy the air temple. They didn't threaten the people specifically, just the temple. So let's say that he doesn't think to do that right away, and he starts building them weapons, and maybe he'll feel bad later. It seems like he has a bunch of chances where the Fire Nation goes away and waits for more weapons and comes back to get them out of there, and he chooses not to. There's no reason for him to stay. He is making the conscious decision to build weapons for the Fire Nation for no reason. I think these two things make him a very bad person. Yes, he is very helpful in the battle, especially at the Battle of the Eclipse. But I don't think that makes up for it. And Teo was obviously not to blame at all. He was a baby when this started, and it's all he's ever known. He's totally not to blame. But Teo's dad is a horrible person, and I do not forgive him. Another question for you guys. Why don't they give Aang a coat at the North Pole? At the South Pole, I understand he was only there for a short amount of time. Maybe they didn't think about it. He was all around playing, sure. But at the North Pole, they're there for a while, and they do not give him a coat. I saw a meme that said that Aang, it's like an airbending trick or strategy to warm yourself with your chi or something like that. But I'm not sure. That was just a meme I saw. I don't know anything about that. So if you guys know if that's true or some other explanation for why he would not need a coat at the North Pole, let me know. Also, whenever we see them camping, or almost anytime we see them camping, he doesn't have a blanket or a pillow or sleeping bag or anything. And I don't know if he's just more comfortable without those things, but I just wanted to have a blanket and a pillow and a coat and be comfortable. Another note about the Northern Water Tribe, it makes a lot of sense that their symbol of betrothal would be a necklace, considering their culture that has to wear gloves a lot. I think that is a nice thing that they did. Obviously, it was to give Katara the necklace for the story and everything, but it makes a lot of sense. Another storytelling thing, I like that they take the time to give the backstory to the most recent waterbending Avatar's story of how he lost the love of his life to the spirit Ko, so that later when Aang is talking to that Avatar and he references it, the audience already knows the story and doesn't need any further explanation, and it's also not a story that is just totally out of the blue. I thought that was a nice use of time and a nice way to tie that together. I just love how everything was black and white in the siege at the North Pole when the moon spirit has died. For one thing, I think it's just really aesthetically beautiful, and then the only thing that lights up the scene is the firebending, except Yue's eyes. They're blue and they're glowing, and I think it's because she has the spirit of the moon in her, so she also has the light of the moon in her. So we always see the light of the moon in her eyes even when the moon spirit is dead. I just think that's beautiful. So thank you guys for listening and making it this far into this video, which I anticipate will have been longer than I initially thought. I plan to make additional videos for books 2 and 3, and possibly Legend of Korra eventually when I do watch it. And yeah, I'm not gonna make one for the movie. I rewatched that just because it was fun, but I don't think I'm gonna watch it again to take notes. I don't know. If you guys have anything else that you thought was great storytelling moments, or if you have answers to any of my questions, or anything else that you thought was great, or requests for future videos, just let me know. Put them in the comments. Thank you. Bye. My assistants.